Rob,
Yo, what's up, man?
not much. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. So this is the Rock Show episode 71, and
Wow.
who are we talking about today?
Talking about a great band called the White Stripes. Now, what
They're
do you think?
pretty much they
What
were
do you think?
pretty good.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, they were very popular. They won a couple of Grammys for what that's worth, and they made some great garage rock.
But they didn't last very long together.
No, no, only about I guess about 10 years. But I mean, 10 years, and then they went on hiatus a little bit, and then they finally broke up.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting story. I think Jack White is an interesting guy, good guitar
Yes,
player.
yes. So let me tell you a little inside story. A buddy of mine that used to hang out in this bar in Detroit,
Yeah,
he used to know this guy called Drunk Jack.
yeah,
So this character, Drunk Jack, will come into the bar. He would play music, and people will buy him drink,
right.
and do all this kind of stuff. In a Mexican bar, like a little dive bar, he would just go there and play for
Yeah.
a few hours. Years later, my buddy goes, "That fucking guy that was fucking Jack, Drunk Jack,
Okay.
that
Oh man.
was Jack White."
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, he started out in the bars, playing in a couple of bands, even before he met Meg White.
Yeah.
But it's a great story. I mean, actually, the White Stripes are one of my biggest regrets because I like the band a lot. I have every one of their albums, but I never saw them live, and it's one of my biggest regrets that I never did.
I
You ever
also
see them?
saw them live in Coney Island, in the Cyclone Stadium. I saw them. They were the headliner, and this show with a bunch of different bands. I couldn't name the other band, but the headliner was the White Stripe, and they went under for 90 minutes. They killed it.
What year was that around, approximately?
Jesus Christ, this got to be This probably was like it was the album before the Seven Nation.
Yeah, it was the one with white blood cells. The one with fell in love with a girl on it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was the album that broke them pretty much.
Yeah, so I went to that day, and it was like a thing. A friend of mine had tickets. Say, dude, I got some tickets for the Coney Island. You want to come? And
Yeah,
I had nothing to do. I'd say, all right, let's go. And it turned out to be a great night. And I was
sure.
right on the floor when they played. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what's always blown me away about them is that for two people, really just a guitar player and a drummer, they had this huge sound, and it really was like something that it was like almost magic. Like, how the hell did they come up with? I mean, he didn't have a bass player, but there was enough bottom in their sound that sounded like they had a bass player. You know?
And you know what? And Meg was not a very good drummer. They always
No, I
shitted on
mean,
her.
well, everybody likes to shit on her. First of all, because she's a girl. Second of all, because she isn't that good. But if you look at what they do, she's good enough.
She was good enough for Jack White, like for what he
Right.
was playing. And he took the guitar and pretty much made it sound like a bass, because everybody thought in that Seven Nation they thought it was a bass.
Yeah.
He just did something with the whammy pads that changed the sound, and it came out with that doom, 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 and it's
Right.
like
Right.
holy shit.
Yeah, but I mean, if you listen to the earliest stuff, which is uh, like the first album, which is like bluesy, heavy, garage sounding punk almost.
Yeah,
Okay. It just had a lot of distortion, and he
yeah.
used distortion in a way to get that bottom without having to have a bass there. And I think it's like pure genius. And what else they used to do too, we'll get into it in a minute, is they would use antiquated equipment when they recorded.
Yeah.
They used old fashioned stuff. They would look for studios around the world that had these things and recorded in like pre 1960 sounding studios. And it's pretty amazing.
And that
'Cause
sound was definitely special, the
it
way they
was.
did
It was.
it. Do you ever seen
Yeah.
the thing with him making a guitar out of a bottle and a nail? You ever seen that thing on YouTube?
I think I did. Yeah, yeah. He makes the sound out of it. Sounds
Yeah.
like a guitar. Yeah.
They had a thing with him. It's like him, Jimmy Page, and the Edge from U2, and they're like sitting around talking about, and they both swear that he thought he had a bass in that fucking song, Seven Nation. He said no, it wasn't. He
Who
showed him pretty
who
much.
thought he had? Who thought he had a bass?
Jimmy
Jimmy Page?
Page and Edge were the first holders. They thought he was playing the bass, and he said, "No, this is what I did." And he showed what he did. It's a pretty cool video.
Yeah, yeah. I think I did see that a long time ago. But all right, so let's get into this. Jack White was really born Jack Gillis on July 9th, 1975 in Detroit.
Yep,
And the other half of the White Stripes is Meg White, born December 10th, 1974 in Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan. Now, Jack was a senior in high school when he met Meg. Uh, Meg's last name was White. We'll get into that in a minute, how that got to be. But they met at a place called the restaurant Memphis Smoke. Okay. And Jack used to read poetry at this restaurant, and she was a waitress. It was like an open mic type thing that he would do.
yep,
And they became fast friends and started to go out together to different clubs to see different bands, all part of the whole music scene around Detroit at the time. Now, White, known at that point, Gillis, played drums with some friends, but got his first professional job in a band drumming for the cowpunk band Goober and the Peas.
yep.
Okay. That would be short lived. They would be having a hot affair for a while, Jack and Meg, and they got married on September 21st, 1996. What Jack did, contrary to what most people do, is Meg didn't take his last name and became Meg Gillis. He took her last name and became Jack White, which years ago when I heard about this, I didn't even know you could do that. But apparently you can.
Yeah, you can do that. It's like
Yeah.
most tradition. It's the woman take the man's last name.
Right. But for some reason he took her name, I guess. Maybe he just wanted to have her. He thought White sounded cooler than Gillis. I never got a real reason
I
as to
told the
why.
name White sounded was way better than Gitters. Like Jack
Yeah.
White, that's much better. I think he still even go by the name Jack White.
Yeah. Yeah. He still uses that name. Um, Goober and the Peas broke up not too long after they got married. And he began playing with a bunch of bands. One band called the Henchmen, one band called Two Star Tabernacle, and another band called the Go. Now, the Go was a band I just got to mention as a side note that I was starting to pay attention to around that time, 1999. They came out with an album called What You Doing, and they are still around. They've put out a couple of albums over the years. I want to say maybe about 4 or 5. I bought the first two and then I kind of tuned out with them. They changed a little bit their style. But the first album called What You Doing, and Jack White plays, he was actually out of the band, but he still plays on the album and does some of the lead guitar work. You have to hear this album. It's just a throwback garage rock classic. Me and Keith, right? My friend Keith.
Yeah,
We went to see the Go a bunch of times at that time because what was happening in 99, 2000, 2001, there was like a resurge of just really good garage rock music. And I was really into it. Like I saw the Go at CBGB's and what was the other place? Max's. What was the name of that place? Not Max's Kansas City because it was gone. What was it? A place in Hoboken? Wasn't it just called Maxwell's?
there was
Maxwell.
a Maxwell. There was another
Yeah.
one like Uncle Jimmy also had live bands.
No, it wasn't that. It was Maxwell's in Hoboken. I remember we took
Maxwell,
that. And that was a great fucking show. We saw them on their second album tour, and it was pretty good. But then they kind of changed their sound a little bit, and I didn't like them as much anymore. But the first album, What You're Doing, is awesome. And Jack was involved with that. But in '97,
Mike, let me ask you a quick question for people that they don't know the terminology of what is your terminology of a garage band?
good question. Okay. Well, you kind of think of a guitar-driven 1960s sound. I would say one of the first real garage rock songs, if I could think of it, would be like Stone's Satisfaction. Okay,
Okay.
fuzzy guitar, distorted guitars, primitive sounding, maybe not the best musically, but kind of like what punk rock became.
Yeah.
but more of an earlier version. And there was some psychedelic elements to garage rock in the 60s that, like, in the 80s when it resurfaced with bands like the Fuzztones and the Chesterfield King, they kind of carried that psychedelic thing over. But in the 90s, what I was noticing, it wasn't so much of a psychedelic garage rock, uh, kind of like, reinventing. It was more straight ahead, guitar sounding, punk influenced, but a little more involved.
A little bit
You
more.
know,
All right.
yeah, and yeah. I mean, people have different definitions of it, but that's pretty much how I look at it. In '97, Meg started playing drums, and at first it wasn't even like a serious thing. She was like doing it almost just on a lark. But Jack liked the way she played and encouraged her, and started to be kind of inspired by jamming with her a little bit that he was doing as a two piece. All right, now he had some different projects going on, but he decided to be in a band with his wife, and they were going to call the band the White Stripes because Meg loved peppermints and their last name was White.
Yeah.
So if you look at a peppermint, it looks like they used to use that symbol like on their drums and shit like that.
Yeah. And what was the deal with the red, white? Like they always wore like red or black. That was pretty much the
Yeah,
costume. Why was that? Do you even
it,
know?
it was a public persona that they wanted to go with. They had a few things that they always did. They either wore red, black, or white,
Yep.
a combination of. They did everything. There's a lot of references to the number three
Yes.
in their songs. Every album, I think, has something. Um, and the idea was that Jack believed in vocals, guitar, and drums is the basis of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all you really need. And it was a primitive mentality, to to do that, given his talent. I mean, he could play all kinds of instruments, but he just kept it simple in that band as a two piece. They also would never do interviews apart. They always did interviews together.
Yeah.
They would put, like I said, white or red or black colors on their guitars. The drums had that peppermint logo on it. They would have backdrops in red and black and white like that on stage. It was just like a public persona that they were putting out there to make people recognize them, give them a look. The first gig they ever did as the White
Well,
Stripes was
before you get
August
into
4th.
what was the whole deal with them when they also came out, they were telling people they were brothers and sisters. Why did they do that?
Oh, yes, I forgot that. I don't know why exactly they did it, man. I think it was probably to trip people up a little bit, and also because they both had the last name, and people probably, I don't know, looked at it them being brother and sister. I don't know. I think it was a way to maybe just trip up people. They didn't give a
Yeah, but they definitely said it a few times.
Yeah, no, they did. Yeah, I do remember that.
I always thought that was weird. Like, why were they using that?
Yeah. It's he's an interesting cat. He was going to be a priest at one point.
Yeah, I saw. I read he definitely was a weird guy.
Yeah. Well, listen, most great musicians are. Jimmy Page, right? You said Jimmy Page before.
Yeah.
That's he's a weird dude. It's all part of that creativeness. The more creative you are, sometimes the more eccentric you are.
And the guy actually went to college. He had a pretty good education.
I think he went to a trade school also. He was going to be
Yeah.
like an upholsterer or something.
Yeah, he
like
was
that.
an upholsterer. He wasn't going to do the union, but he wasn't he wasn't a stupid guy. He could have done anything he wanted.
No, very talented.
Yeah.
And musical from a young age. We're talking like teenager. Even he had he was writing poetry in senior year.
Yeah, like he's a songwriter. He got a voice. He played guitar. He also played the piano, and he played the Mandalorian, which Dan Sweeney from
No, you think
Rabbit played.
It's not a Mandalorian, man. A Mandalorian is from Star Wars.
No, the Mandalay. I mean Mandarin. Yeah. Again, like KFC.
There you go. Well,
that's a little thing. That's a little thing that got a heavy sound, man. Where you can hear that instrument.
Yes. Yes, and it has almost an acoustic sound, but it's loud.
Yeah, it's loud. It's
Yeah,
incredible. Like when you
yeah,
hear that thing, it's like holy shit, man.
yeah. Very distinctive. Very. A lot of bands have used that for good effect. Um, they did their first gig August 14th, 1997, at the Gold Dollar Bar in Detroit,
Yeah,
and they quickly got popular in the whole underground Michigan garage punk scene that was going on. There was a lot of bands that were part of this. The Henchmen, which was one band that he had been involved with before, the Dirt Bombs, the Gories, the Rocket 455s, excuse me. Now, the Dirt Bombs and the Gories featured a guy named Jim Diamond, okay,
yeah,
who, who was a pretty cool dude, produced a lot of people, would end up producing the White Stripes as well. In '98, Jack was approached by Dave Buick, the owner of
yeah.
independent Detroit-based garage punk label Italy Records, about putting out a single. At first, he said no because he figured he'd have to pay for the whole thing and he thought it'd be too expensive. But Dave offered to pay for the whole cost, so he said okay, and that would be the first White Stripes single, and it would be released in February of '98, called "Let's Shake Hands." There's only 1,000 copies of this on vinyl, so if you have it, it's pretty rare.
Oh yeah, they did that twice, right? They
Did that a
released
couple
like
times. Yeah, they did it a few times with different releases. I'll go into that. But in October of '98, they would also come out with a second single that year called Lafayette Blues.
yeah.
Again, that was another one, 1,000 vinyls copies made. In '99,
Mike, let me ask you: Is it a rare? Is it rare with somebody who actually pay for your studio time, and how do you make money off that? Or does the guy just own the song? The guy that produced you or put the money up?
you hear all kinds of stories with bands. Some bands have had to pay to really get things done, and they might get some free recording time, but they gotta press their own CDs or records or whatever. There's always different deals. Some people get really screwed, and they end up paying for a lot. Uh, this looked like this guy was paying for everything, so he thought he could. But it was a limited release of only 1,000 vinyl copies. You know,
Yep, limited release.
right, right. So in '99, after those two releases, they would get signed to the California-based label called Sympathy for the Record Industry, and they would release their first album called The White Stripes, and there would be a single called "The Big Three Killed My Baby." That came out 15th, 1999. Great song. I mean, you listen to this album. I want to say it's probably Jack White says it's their best. I would probably put it like number two or maybe number three. But I think it's a fantastic album. Raw, total garage sounding, primitive, lo-fi. I mean, it's just a guitar and drums. Okay,
Yep.
but they're just the in the production and in the way he plays these guitars, he makes it sound like there's a bass in there. There's a lot of distortion, a lot of bottom. So it sounds like a big, full, four-piece band or even a five-piece band. Because in some of the later albums, not so much on this first one, he actually started putting in guitar solos and stuff like that, and he was starting to get the attention of being a real musician instead of like this kind of punkish, garage sounding dude. Um, the album was produced by Jim Diamond, like I mentioned,
Yep.
and it was recorded at the Ghetto Recorder Studio in Detroit. The album was dedicated to Mississippi Delta blues guy Son House, and he was a big influence on Jack. There's songs on that album where he'll reference Son House's John the Revelator, okay, which is an old blues song. They would do a version on a later album of Son House's song called Death Letter, which is fucking great. Son House is somebody, if we get into we should do like a blues show later on. I'd like to do a show where we talk about Son House, Howlin' Wolf, Sonny Boy Williamson, a bunch of these old blues guys. Do like an hour on that.
Yeah, we could put something together
Yeah,
for right.
yeah. Son
Maybe
House is one
for
of my favorites. I listen to him quite a bit.
maybe
Uh,
for July, right? July. What? Maybe for July, do it or something, or past
I
July.
think I think August. I think we're good through July.
Okay.
Okay, but we'll definitely talk about doing that. Now, blues in general were a very big influence on this band. Okay, Jack was very influenced by, like I said, Son House, Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters. They would cover Robert Johnson's "Stop Breaking Down."
Yeah,
Okay,
that's great.
which is probably, God, you think of all the versions of that. The Stones did a great version on Exile on Main Street, and I think this version of theirs could even be better than the Stones version, or just as good. Um, and Jack always says this is our best album. We never surpassed it. I don't totally agree with him. I think that they kind of evolved a little bit, and you can go with that. But definitely as a whole, it's definitely in that top three.
To
Um,
me, you know what's my favorite album? Get Behind Me, Satan.
yeah, I like that album, and
I love that album.
that album is very different. We'll go into that. It's very different than some of the others. It has piano on it, and all kinds of shit.
Yeah, I just love the way that album sounded. Like from
Yeah,
beginning to end, it was like a great production. Like
yeah,
everything, like every song I thought was good, and it was a great album. You know what?
yeah, yeah. We'll go into the making of that in a few minutes. Um, at the end of '99, they would release a split single with the Detroit band, the Dirt Bombs. 2,000 copies of this would be made. It was basically just them on the A side and the Dirt Bombs on the B side. Very hard to find this. If you have it, hold on to it. It's worth something.
So that's almost like a compilation album, right?
Well, it's a single, just the White Stripes on one side and the Dirt Bombs on the B side.
Oh, okay. I thought
Yeah,
maybe they each did a song. So it's just a single, one single. Okay,
yeah, yeah. Yep.
that's rare. Did a lot of
It
bands do that back in the days?
it used to be back in the day. Yeah, you would have that for a lot of that used to happen often in the punk scene in the '70s. You might have a split single on two bands on the same label put out something. It happened quite a bit. It was usually when it was done, it wouldn't be a big release. It would be a small amount. So those kinds of things are always rare. Um, June 20th, 2000, the band would start. It would release its second album called De Stijl, and that means the style in Dutch. And it was released on the Sympathy for the Record Industry. It was their second album,
Yeah.
and the band at this point had a reputation for being very lo-fi, and they would keep the recording of this album as primitive. What they would do is, they would record this album in Jack's living room on an 8-track analog. So you can't get much more primitive than that. All right. Uh, what's good about them, if you're using an 8-track, is really you got the drums on one track, you got the guitar on another track, and you got the vocals on another track. So you
Wow.
have 5 extra tracks to do a little overdubbing. But some people wouldn't feel comfortable with that. Some people would say, "Nah, I need 16."
Yep.
But they didn't do that. They kept it simple. There wasn't going to be a lot of overdubs. I bet they didn't even use all 8, to be honest with you, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was recorded in his living room, I just can't see how you can get any more raw than that. That album is great. I kind of put that as my favorite album, this year.
Okay.
It's a heavy album as much as the first one is, but it's kind of like, because of the lo-fi production, it has a sound that's just a little different, a little more interesting than the first one, I think. De Stijl was a reference to the De Stijl art movement from, I think, in the early part of the 20th century. And it was considered minimalistic, and the band related to that because they're about as minimalistic as you can be.
Yeah.
Just
You
just
know
to,
what's another thing? They always had great videos.
yeah,
And I really think that
yeah,
helped the music or the video. They
yeah.
had some very strange videos back in
They,
the
they,
day.
they, they did, and when they finally break on the next album, we'll talk about that because they would win an award for that. But in December of 2000, the band released a 3-song EP of Captain Beefheart songs, okay? And that came out on Sub Pop, and it was called Party of Special Things to Do. And it was 3 songs done originally by Captain Beefheart. The title track, Party of Special Things to Do, China Pig, and Ashtray Heart. He's a guy we got to do a show about too. Okay. You ever hear of Captain Beefheart?
Yeah.
All right. A lot of people don't know. They might know the name, but they don't know the music. Uh, Anybody unsure, just check out an album called Trout Mask Replica or an album called Safe as Milk, and you'll be turned on to it. It's like a blues driven. It's kind of like a bluesy Zappa.
Yeah. But it's like
Okay.
it sounds very old, and it's not.
Right. Well, yeah, he had that kind of gravelly old man voice, when
Yeah.
he
So it sounds
yeah,
like you think like, oh my god, and then you look at it, oh, it wasn't taped that. It wasn't. It's
yeah.
not really that
Well, he
old,
had
you know.
he had a long career from the '60s
Yeah.
to I think the late '90s. July 3rd, 2001, they would come out with their third album. Now, what I got to mention is that Distill actually did pretty well commercially, the second album, and it got to number 38 on the Billboard Independent record charts. But with the third album, White Blood Cells, coming out in July of 2001, they would hit gold with this because the band, uh, the album would do well based on the song "Fell in Love with a Girl," and it would actually be re-released on a major label called V2 Records a year later, and that would help push the album into a lot more record sales. The UK caught on to the band a lot with that particular album release. They were critically acclaimed on both sides of the Atlantic. Actually, by the time they did that album,
You know
uh,
what's weird? Not they really never got shit on it a lot. The only
no,
problem they ever got, the only criticism they ever got was Meg on the drum. But Jack was like, I'm fine with that, man, because she
yeah,
vibes with me.
yeah. I mean, he put that to sleep pretty much when people would
Yeah,
comment on her being limited in her drumming skills. I like I said before, I think just because you're limited doesn't mean you suck. All right, if it's good for what you do, I mean, so many punk bands, you know, you just had to carry the beat. That's it, and
yeah, that's it.
that could be hard enough to do. That could be hard enough to do when you're playing a million miles an hour.
Yeah,
All right, so it's I can't do it. So, I mean, I always laugh when people say, "Oh, bands like the Ramones, oh, they're limited." Well, yeah, but they sound good for what they do.
yeah, they did sound good for what they're good, you know.
And the White Stripes were the same. You had two people carrying this big sound all alone,
And you know
and
what? It's amazing for a band with only two people. I always swore there were four people for some reason.
and we've been repeating ourselves saying it, but it's fucking true. You
It
know,
sounded like a much bigger band.
it did, and I don't think all that was just in the production, because if you listen to their live tracks,
They sound just as good.
just as good, and actually sometimes better.
Yeah.
Okay, the Daily Mirror in the UK would make a really outstanding comment about them, calling them the greatest band since the Sex Pistols.
Wow.
Okay, that's a big fucking critique right there, saying that. It's funny because in the early '90s, I remember with the whole Brit pop thing, like Oasis and stuff. The British press was saying like, Oasis is the greatest thing, Beatles. So I guess whatever they compare it to in England. But that was a good compliment. The album did go gold, and based on that single, "Fell in Love with the Girl." Now the video, you mentioned their videos. It was a Lego animation for that song. Okay, it was a Lego animation video with Meg and Jack as Lego characters playing and stuff, and it just became a huge hit on MTV, and they would win 3 MTV Video Music Awards, one for Best Breakthrough Video, one for the special effects, and one for Best Editing in that year. Okay, so that's pretty good. They had other videos that were interesting. I remember, what was that one? The Hardest Button to Button.
Yeah, they always have visually some weird fucking video.
They would be weird but simple. Not like it would be like these cuts where they would appear or disappear, and it would be like all different locations. It was never like they didn't have too many videos, I don't think, or any videos really with them just performing simply. Like there was always something going on in the background, but it was a simple video. It wasn't like this big outlandish thing, you know.
No, they were always simple, but they always were like very weird. They were very
Weird, weird, and
very
I, I,
avant-garde.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that. I'll say this. I think the White Stripes are probably one of the most original and best bands of the last, wow, 25 years. I think
Wow.
maybe I don't know. Am I wrong? Can you think of another band that did what they did and even had the popularity? Not that you have to have that, but I just think like they actually were original in what they were doing, and not too many bands really have in the last 25 years have been so original as them. You know,
They were unique, man.
definitely, definitely. Now in 2002, the band did 4 shows at the Bowery Ballroom here in the city. And these shows were filmed by director George Roca, and he was putting a live collection together called "Nobody Knows How to Talk to Children," and it never got released because the band squashed it. What happened was it was supposed to be a big release, I think, in the theaters and everything, but George Roca started showing it without their permission at the Seattle Film Festival, and they just said, "Fuck it, we're not putting it out." And it's a bootleg now. If you could find it, I've seen clips of it. It's pretty cool. There's some good footage there.
Yeah, they were also in that movie. What was it? 200 cigarettes or whatever.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
They were in that movie, and they pretty much played themselves, I think.
Yeah, I think they were the White Stripes, right? They were the
Yeah.
same. Yeah. Um, the fourth album now would be huge. Okay. The following year in 2003, they would release Elephant, and it was recorded over a 2-week period in London in 2002. And Jack self-produced this album using old, antiquated equipment intentionally, like I was saying before. Most of the equipment in this London studio was from before 1960, which is a sound he was looking for. And the album would be released on V2 Records again, and it was the band's first major label debut. They their second their third album would come out on V2, but it was after it was already released by Sympathy for the Record Industry. So this was their first major release on a major label, and they had the hit Seven Nation Army. It would go double platinum in Britain,
Yeah.
and the album would go platinum in the United States. Jack's guitar style changed on this album. He started having a lot more
Dude,
solos.
but you want to hear something crazy? That song kind of became a sport anthem.
Yeah.
For soccer, like when they come out in soccer, dun, 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 and people use that as a
You were hearing
chant.
it.
It's
You were hearing
crazy.
a lot of You were hearing it at soccer matches. You were hearing them in hockey games too.
Even baseball, everything you will
Yeah,
hear that. It was crazy.
yeah. It was you couldn't get away, and the video was cool. You couldn't get away from that song for a while, and I liked it. I mean, it was
It became like that sports soccer, like one more chance or
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
like those songs you always hear in sports. It's like one of those songs,
Hmm?
We are the champion, and that song.
It became an anthem, like Gary Glitter's rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
You know.
You want to
But
hear Bo and Biscuit was in the Hateful Eight.
yes, Ball and Biscuit's a great fucking song.
That's a great song. I love that song.
I do too. Um, what was happening was he was putting in a lot more solos on this album, and it got the attention of a lot of musicians in general. People were starting to compare him to Jimmy Page, which was a big deal. Is a big deal. They would win a Grammy for this album, Best Alternate Music Album in 2004. Again, being prolific and nonstop between touring and recording. A year later, they were going to make another album, 2005. It was called Get Behind Me, Satan. I always thought that was an interesting title because it is from the Bible.
Yeah.
And he was going to be a priest at one point, I had heard. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. There was some interesting artwork on that album, too. Like, it was just the kind of two of them on the album cover facing each other. I think they're holding an apple.
No,
or something.
they're facing each other away.
Right, opposite ways. Right.
Yeah, there's a mic in the middle, so she's holding an apple, but their hands are reaching out to each other in the back.
Yeah, yeah. Now there's a picture of Jack, I believe, on the inside of that cover with this like really sexy black girl. Okay, and I had heard that was his girlfriend or going to be his wife, but it never happened. I think there was a story I heard where he got married in the Amazon or something, but it wasn't true. You
Oh
know,
my God.
he ended up getting like because they got divorced, Meg and Jack. I think in they never really talk about it, but I think it was like 2003 or something like that. They didn't last that long married, but they stayed together in the band.
Yeah.
Okay, and it wasn't a problem. So I don't know what their relationship was like, but I had heard that he was like hooked up with that black girl, but I could be wrong. It was like a rumor going around. But this is a different album. Get Behind Me, Satan. The
To me,
album,
this is my favorite album.
yeah, I like it a lot. I like everything by them,
I
but
like that
the
opening song, Blue Orchid, and then My Doorbell, Little
yeah,
Ghost is good too.
right, right, little ghost, little
Yeah,
ghost.
it's fucking
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. Now, but it was different too because they had some piano-driven songs.
Yeah,
Okay, like that's "Forever for Her Is Over for Me." Uh, Blue Orchid was a rocking song that was heavy,
that was a great
uh,
song.
but the album was kind of less bluesy than the others, if you notice.
Yeah, this was a little
Um,
bit more like rock and roll, definitely.
Rock and roll, but then it would have like he was dabbling in some different sounds.
Yeah,
Okay, the piano and stuff like that they hadn't really, you know, had too many songs with that in it. This would win another Grammy for them. Again, Best Alternate Music Album in 2005. So they were on top of the world still,
yeah.
even after Seven Nation Army and
You
everything.
know what song I love? I'm lonely, but I ain't that lonely yet.
I'm lonely, but I ain't that lonely yet. Yep.
That's why he got rid of that black girl.
Oh shit. Maybe. Uh, the band now was always touring, but on a Japanese leg of their world tour, they had to postpone because Jack had like strained vocal cords. He wasn't allowed to sing or speak for quite some time. He would get back on track. They would release an EP in November of 2005 called Walking with a Ghost, and that featured a title track, Walking with a Ghost, and 4 other live tracks. In November of 2006, they had a very limited release of what was called an avant-garde orchestral music album.
Mm-hmm.
Jack put it in London, and it was again a very limited release, and it sold out very quickly. Very hard to find that. Um, January of 2007, V2 Records would go out of business, and since the White Stripes contract was actually already up, the band was for a very short time without a contract, but they went over to Warner Brothers pretty much right away, and they got a one-record deal. Now I remember hearing about this, and I was kind of listening to Get Behind Me, Satan a lot, and then I heard that their record company went under. So it was kind of like, all right, who's going to pick them up? And they go to Warner Brothers, and then I hear it's only a one-record deal. Uh-oh. What does that mean? That means one of two things. Either they're going to break up after this album, or Warner Brothers doesn't feel that they want to be responsible for them for more than one album. They're going to check and see if they could still sell. Okay, and now the last 2 albums did fantastic. Last 3 albums,
Yeah.
okay, especially the last 2 did really good. But you kind of, when you hear something like that and you go, well, why are they only getting a one-record deal? Either they, usually if you're going to want a 3-record deal. That's more.
I think the reason they did it because they wanted to do one more album pretty much for their fans because I think they were already on the way out.
Well, that there might be some truth to that, or they were just planning to do one more album and break up, and that would be it. But when you research the story, it's a little gray area. It's hard to tell. They would release their 6th album on Warner Brothers called Icky Thump, and it came out in June of 2007. It entered the UK charts at number 1 and the US charts at number 2. So if they had any doubts, that probably went out the window. As soon as the album came out, it was basically number 1 and number 2 on both sides of the Atlantic.
It was a pretty good album.
Yeah.
I don't see any weakness. I thought
No.
they were as good as ever.
It's actually, considering it's their last studio album, it kind of brings everything back full circle. Okay, because it's a more garagey, blues-driven kind of album with some little punk influences in there. But it would be recorded in 3 weeks, which was their longest ever in recording anything. These guys were like boom, boom, quick in the studio. It wasn't like, you know, 6 months of overdubs. Okay, and they could have been like that, but they weren't. I like the title track, Icky Thump, and then they had that song Conquest, which was kind of like it had like a mariachi kind of thing with the video with the bull.
Yeah.
Okay, and there was actually like a little bit of humor in that video, and like him fighting the bull as the matador and everything. And I like that song. I like that whole album. I think that they.
You know what's funny? If you ever seen the one Ike Tum, that song, they got a
It,
thing about the Mexican
no,
war in it at
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
end.
Icky Thump.
Icky Tum,
Yeah.
they got the
It's about like illegal immigrants.
yeah, but did you see the war at the end, the Great War of Mexico?
Oh yeah, in the video. Yeah.
At the end of the video,
Well,
that's
that was a little.
2007.
Yeah, and that was a little like what do you call it? Prophetic programming. What do they call it?
Predictive programming.
Yeah, you go.
I was laughing. I was laughing every time I would think of that.
Yeah.
Oh, the Great War of Mexico. The U.S. is building a wall to keep Mexicans out.
Maybe that's how Trump got the idea.
I think he got the idea for Arrested Development, to tell you the truth.
Maybe he got it from Pink Floyd.
Come on, build on the wall. Yeah.
Now, April 25th, 2007, the band would start, believe it or not, which would be their first Canadian tour. Okay. Now, they've been around for almost 10 years. They never went to Canada for some reason.
That's amazing.
The way they wanted to do this, though, was they wanted to tour all over the country. Now, most bands, when they go to Canada, where do they go? They'll go to Vancouver, they'll go to Toronto, you go to Montreal, maybe one or two other places. But for the most part, you stay kind of away from the middle part of the country, which is really just fucking tundra land, okay? And like, not that many people there. But there are enough people to make shows, okay? And they wanted to play places that nobody really hit. They would play the Yukon, okay? They played small clubs when they could. They played bowling alleys and YMCAs, all right? They played a YMCA in Arva, Ontario. Nobody went to these places. And they were doing small gigs and secret gigs that would only be announced on like the fan message boards on the internet. So, it was kind of like a tour in Canada, like, hey, we never been there, but we're going to go all out for you guys. Okay. So I was,
and they probably did it like that. So actually the fans would get the tickets instead of having a bunch of scalpers and all this other shit,
Yeah, but I think that's true. But I think that they, wanted to hit the smaller towns and cities because in Canada, I mean, it's winter like what, 6 months a year, basically.
Yeah.
All right. So, you're not going to travel. If you're a guy in the middle of the country somewhere in Sasquatch, okay, you're not going to, Saskatchewan, whatever it's called. You're not going to go to Montreal. You can't do it. Okay. So, they hit all these places for these fans, and that's very cool.
Yeah.
After the Canadian tour, they had an American tour lined up. All right. And they were basically playing gigs down in the South. Now, there was a gig planned. It was supposed to be the last gig of the Southern leg, and then they were going to go on hiatus for a little while. And then they had some other shows planned in the fall, I believe in America as well. But at the last gig for the Southern tour in South Haven, Mississippi, Meg announced that it would be the final White Stripes show ever. All right. And it came as a shock. Apparently, she was done performing. She suffers from severe stage fright and severe anxiety just in general. And she just couldn't deal with it anymore, dealing with the rigorous touring. Probably the Canadian tour knocked the shit out of her because it was pretty rigorous.
Yeah.
Now, the band would go on a long hiatus after that, Rob. But between 2008 and 2011, the band would be on hold and they would just make a couple of appearances. One major one would be on the Conan O'Brien show in February of 2009.
Which I think that was the last show before he went to TBS.
Yeah, it was it was also the last show they would ever play.
Wow.
Okay. They didn't make any other appearances. Now, Jack was getting involved with some solo projects. He was working with a band called the Raconteurs. which are pretty good. Um, he was also producing people. He produced Loretta Lynn's album called Van Leah Rose that I believe got her a Grammy. That was a big comeback album for her. Um, they would also have material for a seventh album, but it's in the can. They never put it out.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the Canadian tour
But
that they did.
Mike,
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. Jack
Sure.
White was always involved with other projects. He was a guy that was always busy, even though it wasn't the White
Yeah.
Stripe, but he always did other projects,
Yes,
right?
he produced a lot of people over the years. Even a lot of bands that really didn't go far, the Detroit bands and stuff like that. He would play guitar on certain people's albums. Um, he was getting to be known as, very busy guy, all out there doing, studio work, live shows with the White Stripes, studio work with the White Stripes, but also, producing. And then he had some side projects like the Raconteurs.
Yeah.
He started that after the White Stripes were on kind of like a hiatus, not doing anything. And they
He
had
was almost like
that.
in that weird kind of David Bowie kind of thing. He producing
Sort of.
people instead of singing. Just I'm
Yeah,
going to produce these people.
yeah. No, that's a good analogy. Bowie was always busy,
Yeah,
and so was Jack.
yeah,
The Canadian tour would be filmed, okay, and it would come out on a DVD called Under the Great White Northern Lights.
yep,
It was directed by Emmett Malloy, and it was released in the summer of 2007. It documents those shows they did right across Canada in 07. I have that DVD. It's fantastic. Uh, Shows them really kind of their whole studio catalog. It's not an early show; it's
yeah.
a late show for them in their career, but it has everything. And one thing that you got to point out with the live shows, and again, I never saw them. I wish I did.
Yeah,
And
I saw that. They were good. They were very
yeah,
good.
I
And
know people that did, and I regret because I remember the Bowery Ballroom shows they were doing. I was considering going, and whatever circumstances, I just didn't go. But their live shows, they never used set lists.
oh yeah, they never did. That was the
Yeah,
thing they never did. They never had a set list for any show. They just play whatever they
right,
would
right.
start in.
They might have had some little bit of structure what they were going to start with, but you never knew what song was coming next compared to the last show you saw. It wasn't the same thing, and that's it kept with Jack felt it kept the spontaneity of the live shows going. Now in November,
I think he's right.
I agree.
I think it comes for a very more predictable, enjoyable show. Let me start with this, and then I'll work my way to this.
Well, that is strictly for the fans. Anybody that does that, you're doing it for the fans
Yep.
because you're not doing it for yourself because it's easier to play pretty much the same set list with maybe a couple of changes every night.
Yeah.
You just that's how you get your chops. You play the song all over and over and over. You throw in a couple of different ones here and there. Now some bands,
But you know what? That's also good. Let's say if you go see them multiple nights, you won't be seeing the same show. It could be a totally
exactly,
different playlist, totally
and,
different song. So that's
right,
actually makes
and
it fun for the fans.
exactly. That's why I think they did it. I think they did it just for the fans because it's not easy every night a different set. You know, in November of 2010, they did a cover of Loretta Lynn's song "Rated X," and it was on a tribute album to Loretta Lynn as well. Jack is on record saying he loves Loretta Lynn's music. I agree with him. I always play Loretta Lynn in the fucking iBar.
You think
And
he hit that shit?
oh,
Jack hit Loretta, then they all won.
she's kind of like his grandmother, but
Doesn't matter. It's
no,
the legend.
I
It's the
know. Listen,
legend thing. Come here,
they
suck
had
my
that
dick,
song,
Loretta.
the Van Leah Rose album. There's that great song called "Slow Gin Fizz."
Yeah.
Maybe it got a little lumped up. You never
Yeah.
know. Okay.
Late night at the studio producing, baby.
You never fucking and nobody around. You never know.
She
We're
gave
gonna
him
be
a gummy.
gummy worm. February 2nd, 2011. It would all be hung up for good because the band decided to hang it up officially.
Wow.
That would be the end of them. there's talk every once in a while them getting back together. I know Meg got married. I think she had a child. Okay, so she's pretty much domesticated, not playing much. Can she come back out and play with Jack again? Maybe. Okay. Now, I don't know if
You
you ever
know, they
heard
had that weird video. They had that one song that came out like in 2017. Like they even had a video with in the shower called City Lights.
Yeah. Was that under the White Stripes name? I don't
I
remember.
think it was under the White Stripe. It was very. You didn't see none of them. It was just such a song, and somebody's in the shower making faces, making hands, and drawing. It was a very bizarre video.
Yeah, I think I remember it. I don't know if they released it as a single or something, but it might have been like the last thing they were going to break up and have
Yeah.
that last come out. Now, did you know that there was a sex tape
No.
with Meg White?
No.
Yeah, there was, and it was supposedly her and her husband. I think it might have been on their honeymoon or sometime, and it's her. It's fucking her. Okay, it's not like one way you go. Oh, it doesn't really look like her. Nah, it's her. And she, was fucking destroyed by it. I heard that she was trying to get it all, taken off the internet, but that's hard to do. You know.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Unless you like Tommy Lee and Pamela Anderson putting it out on purpose. All right, yeah, that could always be destructive.
Yeah, man, that was fucking.
Yeah.
That was crazy. The Tommy Lee shit.
Oh yeah. Well, all those the Kardashians, all that stuff.
So, Mike, let me ask you a question. So, after
Sure.
6 studio album, 2 live album, 1 extended play LP, and 1 concert film, 1 tour documentary, 26 single, and 14 music video, where will you put them up as a band?
Like I said, I put that band as the best band of the last 25 years. I think. Okay.
I think they rank up there, like in the 100. I think they're like something like between 30 or 40. Somebody put them up in a thing.
Like best bands of all time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know where I'd put them in that. I don't know if I would put them as high as 30.
No, I think they would be either between 30 or 40. I forgot what it was because I read it somewhere. And they also sold millions. They sold close to like fucking 50 million albums too.
Worldwide, yeah. I mean, these guys. It was a rare example, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s when they were really peaking.
Yeah.
Early 2000s. It was what was on the fucking radio then? Nothing. It was shit, just like it is now. The last 20 years has been shit, and they were kind of like, wow, these guys are rocking. They're fucking original sounding. Again, 2-piece with just this big sound, and I was always amazed by it. And they were kind of like an anomaly at that time. They were the only thing really on the radio popular selling records that were in this genre, selling so much,
Yeah, and I think all the songs, pretty much, a lot of the songs made it to the top 10. I think. I don't think they really had a.
They only had. I think they only had like 1 or 2 American top 40 singles.
Yeah.
Okay, but the albums did really well.
The album didn't do, but they did good. Like Nation, like Seven Nation was really good.
Yeah, well, you got to remember the whole industry was changing.
Yeah.
Then. It was less about singles, more about albums and videos.
Yeah.
The single might be more geared around the video than it is about putting 45s out or CD singles out.
Yeah, most of the videos all went to number 1 because I remember watching MTV Top 20 or VH1 Top 20, and they were always up on the chart up there with the video.
Right, definitely. So yeah, buddy, that's all I got for you.
That's pretty good, man. We went through a lot of history, but the White Stripe was definitely one of the best bands, and if they ever get together and you really get to see them, this is a great band to see live because who the hell knows?
Yeah, I will. If they ever reunite, I will be sure to go.
But I think, Mike, I think these guys are also in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame already.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's been.
You don't think so? For some reason, I swear I read that. Only if I'm confused it with something else that I read.
No, I didn't come across that in the research. They've been. You have to have 25 years.
Isn't that what it is? For some reason, I swear.
25 years. So it's been. No, it hasn't been 25 years yet. The first album was what, 99, I think.
No,
right.
First album was Yeah, it was 99.
right? So you're talking 21 years. So they got a few more years before they can get nominated. They will get
I
in.
think they will.
They will. No, they will. I mean, everything that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame looks at, the record sales and all that shit, they will get in there. Okay, and the work that Jack White's
I think
done
I'm
with different
confusing
actors.
what we saw when we talk about Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they got in there pretty first ballot, I think. Um, yeah. So where can we find you, Rob? We haven't talked about that in a while. Where are you at these days?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. What else? Email. You can email me at Rob Rossi getting lumped up .com, and pretty much that's pretty much you can find me anywhere.
Yeah.
And also on Twitter, getting lumped up.
Under Getting Lumped Up. Okay. Now I'm on Instagram, Rocker Mike 212. I'm on Twitter, Rocker Mike 3. And you can find me on Facebook under my real name, which is Michael Baker, Baker, Baker.
So, like always, I'd like to thank you, Mike, for all this great information and all your hard work in looking up a lot of this information, because I know it's not easy. A lot of work going into making these shows and notes and
No,
writing, and
it's a labor of love, man. It's my pleasure.
and
bringing the news out there.
I definitely got to give you a big thank you for all your hard work, because I've been researching also, looking shit up, and I'm like, holy shit. Then I look into some other shit, but wow.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Well, I mean, for an hour-long show, I try to give as much info as I can, and sometimes there's things I got to leave out.
Yeah.
There's just no time, but we get it out. We get it done. I talk fast.
Yeah, so next week is Cheap Tricks.
Next week is Cheap Trick, and I know you're going to shit
Nah,
on.
I'll be all right. I'll try to be good. So for
all right,
for everything else, don't get drunk, get lumped up. See you next week.